It's surprising how slap happy, how haphazard surnames are. Because if you look at these early rental books there, for example, you'll find that people are not given under surnames in most cases. They're given under the patronymics. Let's see if we can find a good example. That's a tack. Let's get that. Here we are. It just happens to be the one it opened at. It's Arnold, the road. A list of the tenants in Arnold. And they're half Gaelic, half English. It's strange the way they did it. John Moore, okay, in Moore. Angus Ogg, all right. Malcolm MacCoil. Malcolm McColl, Malcolm son of Donald. Donald MacEonoig. Machinoig. Donald MacGillichrist. Kenneth MacLeay. Donald MacKean. Donald MacGillichallam. Donald MacHaramet. John MacKean. And this is a good one for you. Angus Mac Curracywane. Angus MacCurracywane. It's Pidgin Gaelic, written phonetically as an Englishman. And the other one is John Ban, so that's your tenants in Arnold. So the names are all given in that form, unless you were a stranger, and therefore nobody knew what your father and grandfather were called, or you were slightly more posh than the rest, you were getting a surname, or maybe you were one of the army pensioners from the old French wars, and you had to sign or at least make a mark for the pension. You'd use a surname for that. So people who were used to writing the names were using surnames, but everybody else was referred to by patronymic. Right. Well, here in Upper Carloway, a Donald McComish. Well, that family, I think, are McDonald's now, so there are MacLeods as well that have Thomas in the name. But he could equally well have turned up nowadays as being Donald Thompson. It just depends who was writing it down and how far they translated it. Some are quite strange. There's Donald Cook in Carloway. And you follow the family through the MacLeods now, they're in Carloway, they're in Point as well. The Cochanan. And no, it's looked on now as being a nickname, but in fact it was what they were using as a name at that time. It was only later they started to use MacLeod. And it's quite strange. I take this is an extreme one, fair enough. But take John, who was of the MacLeods, whose father is Donald. He's got black hair, he's a tailor, and he comes from Kintyre. Depending who's talking to him, he could be in MacLeod, Ian McColl, in Talia, fair hair making two, in Ban, or in Talia from Kintyre. And somebody from away writing it down could have made him what? John MacLeod, John MacDonald, John Bain, John Taylor, or John Tulloch. And it is a bit of a lottery which one you actually come out with in the end. And the 1718 rental, that early one I was saying, when the government took the records, it was marvellous. Because they sent a poor soul up to the islands to make a note of all the people's names and the rents they were paying. And it's, he's trying to write down Gaelic with no knowledge of the thing at all. And he had a fairly good try. There's one in Bor, at Smiths in Bor, John MacElephant. Now, how do you spell that if you don't have any Gaelic? Well, he did not bad. MacElephat. Not bad. But then, of course, everything went down to Edinburgh to be copied out into the ledger there. And the poor man there spent months writing down words, none of which meant anything to him at all, and he suddenly found a word he knew. And down it went. MacElephat. And the chap was MacElephant. So don't be surprised if names change. the number of people that say to us, oh, that's not my name, we only spell Morrison with one R. Would you like to know what your father's birth certificate has on it? Because remembering that when you went to register a birth, did you see what the registrar wrote down? In these days, could you read it if you did see it? You're completely at the mercy of what he put down. And particularly with Christian names, they translated them all. And if you're an unusual Christian name, then the translation could be pretty unusual too. I mean, why? The name Beck, do you have in this area? What do you mean? Betty, Bessie, something like that? Yeah. Well, it's most of Lewis is Bess or Bessie or Betsy. In Harris it's Rebecca. In Lochspage it's Sophie. Now, why Sophie for Beck? You think, well, does it matter? Well, yes. Think of somebody who was born in Harris, married in Stornoway, and died in Lochs. Their birth registration says Rebecca, their marriage one says Betsy, and their death one says Sophie. How would you know that was the same person? If you didn't know. Ain't that good? I found an odd one in South Uist where they have the Christian name Eog, Ewan, because it's used that for Yoin, and they come out with Eugene. All right, it wasn't too bad. The next man was the schoolmaster, he had some Latin, Eugenius, and the next one was a schoolmaster, he had some Greek, Diogenes. Now, Diogenes MacPhee is not one of the more convincing names. Well, we can laugh. But I was over in Cape Breton, and up in the northeast of the island, above Shettican, there's a huge rock face overhanging up in the hill. And I asked, what's that called? Diogenes Rock. Oh, come off it. What's it called in Gaelic? Craigui. So we had exactly the same thing there. They're just funny translations that the registrars made up for themselves. And the registrar changed, and everybody's name changed. So you do get surprising names coming up. You say, well, that's not my people, but yes it is. Eirich is one of the worst. I mean, how is Eirich going to turn up in a written register?
It's Eric and Lewis.
Okay, but it's Eirich and Harris. Effie, Euphemia, Erica, Henrietta, Etta, Harriet, Africa, Africa. All sorts of variations of the one name because of the language problem. And I think that language problem is quite important because did the registrar and the informants really understand each other a lot of the time? Because you find a lot of mistakes in the register. A very common one, and it crops up in Chris's own family. Say a William MacDonald married, and his wife's name, John MacDonald it was, sorry, married to MacElephant. Sometimes in the register there's Magdalene, sometimes there's Matilda, an unusual name. And he dies. And his parents' name are shown in the register as John MacDonald and Magdalene MacLeod. The chances of his wife being Magdalene and his mother being Magdalene both are so small it would be just impossible. And I'm sure what happened is the son went to the register said name of deceased, John MacDonald, name of parents, and he gave his own parents, not the deceased parents. And so you got the wrong information crops up. And there's a lot of wrong information in records, I'm sorry to say. Quite surprising. So.